six-pack Lapadat. Got legends, Matt Gary, Amelia Potter, and this is the Euros 2025 recap show. And who better to have, Amelia? You called the action. Matt, you were in the action. We're going to do like we usually do. We'll start with the men's lightest, go all the way up, and then we'll flip over to the women's. So we'll take it up at the 59 kilo class. And Amelia, what were your thoughts on the 59 kilo class? I know there was no Brits in this one, so I don't know, Matt, if you had seen this.
Yeah, it was a good class. I think we were saying before about how there aren't really any classes that are falling behind in terms of battles anymore, which is really cool to see. And we saw Brian Xiong from France, who's a little bit newer to the scene than Antoine Garcia, and he just beat him. Well, ended up beating him by 10 kilos. So it was a really good fight between the three of them, of course, with Campano Diaz from Spain coming out on top, and it really was a pretty great start to the competition because obviously we were in Malaga in Spain, and there was a lot of support for the Spanish lifters. So to kick the competition off with the first champion being Spanish was pretty spectacular.
A little bit surprising that Garcia had a day like he did. So he missed all of his third attempts. He even missed a second deadlift. And Garcia, who in 2022 was the world champion, now looks like he's getting nudged off the top spot just in France alone. Now that also speaks to a rising tide in the 59 kilo class, but a little bit shocked he had a day like he did.
Yeah, still, I mean, even on his worst day and walked away with squat gold, and he does shine, particularly in the squats. But like you said, he missed out on a lot of kilos on the day, which really, really hurt him. And like you said, with Xiong kind of coming through as a more rising athlete, I suppose, even though they're not too dissimilar in age, it's interesting to see maybe how that shifts, not just within France, but like in international competition.
With the CL, Ivan progresses 607.5. Obviously, Feto's coming back. Wasker is firmly into the 600s. So these fellas, they got to start adding some kilos if they're going to keep podiuming at the World Championships. But Ivan, young guy, born in 2001, looks like he could do just that as long as he stays in the 59 kilo class. Moving on to the 66s, and it looks like we got a bit of a battle here. We got a couple of Brits in there, so I'm assuming, Matt, you were working this one. But a three-way tie, broken on body weight, very reminiscent of the World Championships last summer. Now, obviously, not quite, did have the kilos that we did at the World Championships, but nevertheless, a three-way tie in the 66s for the European title. This obviously speaks to just how competitive the 66 kilo class is. And the old timer, born in 1978, pulling out a big victory here. Matt, what can you tell me about the 66s?
Yeah, this was a really big deal. I mean, and Amelia, please chime in if I'm mispronouncing his name, but is it Savolainen? Is that how we pronounce his last name?
Binen, I think, but yeah.
I think not. Yeah, Leinen.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, Leinen. Gotcha. So Antti, you may recall for historians, this guy's been around for a minute, and he won the 2015 Classic World Championships in Finland, in his home nation, with a total of 650.5. So when you look, you say, wow, that's not much progression. This guy's only put 5 kilos on his total, in 10 years. And having said that, look, the guy's a seasoned veteran, and he still did what he needed to kind of squeeze out the W here. There was a bit of gamesmanship going on by the Finnish coaches, I believe, because if I'm not mistaken, they did bump his deadlift opener up by, I think, to the tune of 20 kilos, if I remember correctly, Amelia.
Oh,
So
wow.
I think on the board, when openers came through, we saw the 250, and I was like, that seems a stitch low. But, so they did bump that up 20 kilos, but hats off to him. I mean, the guy had a 6 for 9 day. I mean, he missed, his second and third bench, but just, staying in the mix and kind of not giving in, and then obviously being able to bump the deadlift, was able to make three pulls, and win on body weight there at the end. So it was a really exciting class. He had a strong push there from Christopher Catena, the Austrian, who is just, I mean, looks like a bodybuilder when you see this guy. And he was hitting some huge weights in training. So he had a fantastic 9 for 9 day. I don't know if they really could have squeezed any more out of him. I mean, he just had a banner day and landed on 655 as well. But obviously with Antti having that, being able to pull close to the end, or I should say probably, second to last, looking at the numbers here, he's going to be able to kind of pick his spots and do his thing. And then, of course, we had two Brits. Fortunately, this is the first time in international competition that Team GB has had 266s. And so that's really speaks to the rising tide within British powerlifting, but and the quality of lifter. And so we had, Kibria Ali, and of course Joey Diva, and in the spirit of ethics and integrity, we decided to split the coaches. You don't want to have the same person calling the shots for each lifter. Each lifter, of course, deserves their own advocate. So we just ran it back from British nationals. And again, I took Joey, and and Peach, Alex Pearson Jones, of course, my cohort, took Kibria. And what a battle it was. It just came down to the very end there to snag those fourth and fifth spots. And the story of the day was really both of our lifters going 8 for 9, but it's a very different vibe and a very different feel, when you miss a lift early on, and then you're able to kind of come back and finish on this high note, which is what Joey did, crushing his last deadlift at 272.5, which was a PB for him, a 5-kilo PB. Probably he even had a little bit more, but we didn't necessarily know that. That wasn't really on our bingo card, and that would have been, just a gigantic jump from his second attempt. And then, of course, Kibria, doing a little bit of the opposite there, was running a perfect race, 8 for 8 on the day, just kind of staying in the pocket. Peach was pacing him perfectly. He was right there in the mix, knowing that he would have that final pull. And this being his first internationals, I just think it might have, the moment, and I think he's admitted this, admitted so much, that the moment kind of got to him a little bit, and when he went out for his last pull, he was very confident, but kind of thought, hey, look, I've got this thing wrapped up. I've got it won. And, just kind of rushed his setup, rushed his process a little bit, and wasn't able to connect on that final deadlift, which would have given him the win. But, not to be forgotten, of course, is Francis Brandon Vigoro, I believe is how we pronounce his name, who was able to, again, come in third, and just a super tight class. I mean, the top, we're looking at the score sheet, the top 5 lifters are all separated by only 10 kilos. And to your point, Ryan, we had a bodyweight podium again. So you're in a situation where the only lifter who went 9 for 9 was Christopher from Austria, and every other lifter, unfortunately, missed at least one lift. And so that, the margins are so slim, just razor thin, that's what happens at this level. You can't miss. And the first person who does miss when it's this tight, it's going to wind up, kind of falling down the rankings there. But of course, just speaking from the British perspective, we're really thrilled and happy for our lifters. I mean, did we anticipate the two of them getting on the podium? Yeah, we probably did. And there's a little bit of bitterness, kind of in our taste from that perspective, but still very proud of the way that they both performed, considering that this was the first time that Kibria had ever made an internationals. Of course, Joey's been on a few teams, but for them to, essentially almost tie their PB totals, at an international event with strict judging and so forth is just, hats off to them.
Well said. Now, looking at the 74s, I got a question for you guys. Me and Amelia were talking about this offline. Matt, were you shocked Shell weighed in the way he did at 73.5 kilos? My man went from Sheffield as a 66. He's a full-on 74 right now. And not only is it a little bit shocking about the weight gain since Sheffield, because it's not easy taking the weight off. That was very well documented. He has to do that by Worlds. And we're not exactly far out from Worlds to start shedding that kind of weight. You were there, you were live. I don't know if you talked to Shell. I'm assuming Shell or his handlers or people around him. What's going on here?
Um, did you want me to chime in first, or are we looking for Amelia's perspective?
You could chime in, then we could break up the whole battle
Yeah,
itself. But
yeah, for sure. I did speak to Chell. I mean, actually at great length. So, and I think I'm pretty much at liberty to kind of reveal what was going on here. Yeah, not gonna lie, and I think he would admit it if he were here on the podcast. He had a pretty big rebound in body weight after Sheffield, and so it's obviously we know the Sheffield story that's been told, a bunch of times. He worked incredibly hard to cut down weight and to be super disciplined. And I think immediately after that, it's almost like letting the air out of this balloon, right? It's this sense of relief, like I did it. And he's in a position here where he matter of factly is the strongest guy in the room. And I think he knew that. And I think it was one of these situations where he just, he laxed up a little bit and he allowed the body weight to kind of creep back on, and that's why you see a body weight, of of 73.5, to your point, Ryan, just barely making it in. I think he just needed a diet break, to be honest with you, needed a life break, a stress break, however you want to frame that, and just took his foot off the gas a little bit, nutritionally speaking, to allow himself, a brief respite, before he's got to tighten everything down again for Worlds. And knowing that he had the strength and had the kilos to play with. And look, this is a prestigious competition. I've been saying this for a long time. Euros, at least in my eyes, is almost like a World Championships light. It is a World Championships B. I mean, this is a very prestigious competition. You have a lot of tremendous global talent from that portion of the world arriving. But to his credit, I mean, Chell being the best in the world, essentially, knew that he had a little bit of breathing, and so knew that he could kind of take this break and in terms of body weight, and still come in and be able to put forth a winning performance. And so, yeah, not making excuses for him. I just think he needed a break. And so, he let his body weight kind of creep up there. But as we then kind of look at the day, I mean, it wasn't exactly the day that I think he wanted. He went 7 for 9, which is not bad. I mean, if you go back and ask him, I'm sure he's a little bit ticked off about the benches. He missed 2 benches there. But aside from that, he was able to put together a 775 total. And I know that that's only 5 kilos over Sheffield, and everybody might have been anticipating, oh gosh, is he going to hit 800 at Euros? And it's like, I like to use this analogy. He did what was required, right? Not what everybody wanted to see. And so he came in, he made weight, albeit just by a little bit, and was able to put together a winning performance against, Joshua Wright, who's no slouch. We talked about him on the preview show. Joshua did Joshua things, which is going 9 for 9 and having an exceptional day and ending on a 655 kilo total, which ties his personal best total. And yeah, so that was kind of the story of the day, was just Chell having a little bit of breathing room and having the ability to not necessarily be at his absolute best, but still being able to do what was required and get the W at a very prestigious competition, kind of using this, I don't even want to say a tune-up. It's just another opportunity for him to compete, to collect another title. And now I think he's well aware that he's got to tighten the screws down, get his act together nutritionally, and get back on the grind.
Amelia, what is your impression of the body weight? We're 2 months in a week or so out from the World Championships. Has this now become a storyline all over again about Shell making weight for 66s? Because obviously it'd be potentially, anyways, easier to maintain than have to cut it all over again. And now you have people like the other 66s really eyeballing this.
Yeah, it's tough. It is tough. Like you said, we're about 11 weeks out from Worlds as it stands, and 7 or odd kilos to lose at that body weight is a significant amount. It was over 10% of what his body weight is. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he had longer heading into Sheffield to cut a similar amount of weight, which he already, I know, struggled with. Um, Perhaps, it was a quicker inflation of his body weight and therefore maybe easier to get back to what is more around his baseline now than before as he spent less time. I don't know, but it's going to be a tough gig for sure. I'm not saying he's not going to do it, but I do think it's going to be incredibly hard. And I think he probably would have wanted to be in a place heading into Worlds where, and I know he said this after Sheffield, that he felt more comfortable at 66, like he spent more time there. So it felt like a more regular body weight for him. So I do think it's going to be challenging. And I know that I was saying to you, Ryan, before we got on the podcast and before Matt enlightened us there, I was wondering if he did something similar to Agatha a couple of years ago, where she did girl power and she didn't want anyone to know she was a 69 yet, and she drank into it and she ate into it, just to play some mind games. But I said, I don't know how strategic he's trying to be, or if, he just ate up a good amount of pizza after Sheffield. So it's gonna be a tough gig for sure. But will he do it? Yes. How that will impact him a second time in a short space of time, I'm not so sure.
It's going to be interesting. I'm interested in seeing how this goes. All the
And
other 66s in the world are paying attention as well. Sorry, go ahead, man.
yeah, no, the only thing I was also going to say is there is this. I mean, let's just look at the data. It's the facts don't lie. There's this huge gap between his best total at 66 and the rest of the field. I mean, that's just those are the facts. And so he's got some wiggle room. He doesn't. I don't think he necessarily has to come into Worlds. I mean, I'm sure he wants to put his best foot forward. All athletes do, right? All athletes want to come in and be as strong as they can possibly be. It's just, if he put together a 770 at Sheffield, he may not need 770 again in Germany. And that's no disrespect to the other competitors. I do believe that they are sending as well. And part of the reason that they're ascending is because of him. So, they're chasing him. And I do think that they will close the gap. But I don't know that he necessarily has to go into, Germany and hit an 800 kilo total to win or do anything like that. He might be able to come in right around where he was at Sheffield, maybe even 10 kilos less, and still be able to secure the W and secure another world championship, which is adding to his legacy. So, but
Fair
we shall
point.
see. I mean, definitely to your point, Amelia, this is going to make things harder on him. I think after having talked to him also, he knows what he's up against. He put himself in this situation. And I think honestly, I just think mentally and physically, he just needed a little break. That's all. And I do believe that, he clearly possesses the discipline, the willpower, the fortitude, and then on game day, the acumen to compete at that level. And I have every confidence that he will come into Germany and we will see the prime Chill Backlund that we're all used to see.
I can't fault him if he needs a break because I know the first cut was extremely difficult. On the flip side, second cut's going to be harder because he needed that break. I mean, if he thought the first one was tough. However, to Amelia's point, he's done it before. The blueprint has already been laid out, if you will. So they know what they're doing. And I'm sure we got the weeks lined up in terms of body weight he'll have to lose. Him, Kedrick, they're not flying blind on this. They've already done this once. They know what to anticipate. And to your point, Matt, yeah, he probably doesn't need 770. And this isn't Sheffield. He doesn't need to
Right.
break it by a massive margin. He's just got to
Right.
win, even if it's
Just
win
gotta win.
ugly.
That's it.
Moving on to the 83s. No major surprise that Ade walked away with this. But Amelia, what was your impression of his performance? Foot a little half off the gas?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ade is not shy in saying he wanted to go and do what he needed to get best lifter. He wanted to show up, have a good day with, there's no need to empty the tank post Sheffield, pre-World, especially when, he knows that other countries in the 83s are going to be coming in hot and heavy in Germany in a couple of months' time. Um, he had a RP 7 day, if you want to call it that. Like it was really relaxed. He got best lifter. He saw already what Chell had done and the GL points he'd gotten. And I think he knew that was really the only person that could have taken that from him. Or it would have been a really, really tough job for anybody to get that afterwards. The 1-2 in terms of best lifter was Ade and then Chell and then CC in the 105s. So, it obviously gets harder as body weight goes up generally, but he totaled 840, considerably higher than anybody else in that class. He very much is in a class of his own in terms of the competition at Euros. He really had quite a stroll through the day, and I think that could have been good for both his confidence and just feeling out another competition heading into Germany, where he knows he'll be going with Durans. He'll be going up against one of the 83s. We've got from America. We've got American nationals coming up next week. Um, we've got Enahoro. There are a whole bunch of 83s that could be contesting against him, and I think coming to Euros, collecting that best lifter trophy, and just going 9 for 9 is a huge confidence boost in that.
Yeah, it speaks volumes to where the 83s are at right now. When 840 is cruise control win for a guy, and 840 was like the top end by only one guy, Russell Orhe, forever. He'd show up, post up 840. Everyone else is 20 kilos back. Now, that's a cruise control win for a guy like Ade. Also, this reminds me, by the way, congratulations, Matt, as the coach for Great Britain and Great Britain men's side taking I guess I could have said this at the end after we've recapped it all, but taking a national team title at the European Championships. Well done, sir. I know there's probably a whole lot of pressure on you when you come over and sign up. And there was a lot of focus and attention to you taking over the helm for Team Great Britain as a coach, and you got the win at an international, and this is the first one, buddy. So you did good. You're living up to the hype. Congratulations on that, Matt. What were your
Thank you
thoughts
very
on
much.
this?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add from what Amelia said. I mean, this was cruise control for Ade, and I think it's phenomenal. It's a 9 for 9 performance. Again, it was what he set out to do. It's what he and Peach, who was his coach on the day. So I don't want to take credit away from Peach. Peach masterminded this whole deal. I was on the strategy and the game planning call, but he was driving the bus on this one. And did just a phenomenal job. I mean, they were both masterful. The calls were good in terms of attempt selection. And I know that you can be a little bit more lax when your foot's off the gas. But having said that, this was still a great performance, a momentum builder. Ade is no stranger to competition. He's been competing since 2019, and he's got, a fair amount of internationals under his belt, junior world championships, etc., those sorts of things. But still, to come to another international, strict judging, go 9 for 9, sharpen your sword, so to speak, right? Just continually honing your craft, and to have a performance like this where you're not emptying the tank, but you are showing the world, hey, look, this is what I'm capable of, even on a day where I'm not going all out. I think also sends a different kind of warning shot to the rest of the field, like, hey, this is what I can do when I'm just kind of messing around. Wait and see what I can do in Germany when I really put my foot on the gas. So yeah, and if you kind of look at the score sheet, after Ade, we've got Paul, Rambo in second place there, and he had just a really phenomenal competition. Only missing one lift, his second deadlift, but then he went up and made his third. So we kind of look at those days where you miss one but go up as maybe it's like an 8.5 out of 9. But he had a really good day coming in second, and it was kind of like just like we saw in the 74 kilo class, where there's kind of these gaps between the podium finishers. Likewise, we saw that in the 83s. The real battle was between Robin from Sweden and, of course, Sasha from Germany, kind of duking it out there for that bronze medal position. And because Sasha was able to go 9 for 9 and make his final deadlift, of course, he was able to then secure the bronze medal position on bronze. But yeah, that's kind of how I saw the 83s. And again, Ryan, I mean, thank you for congratulating me and, of course, Team GB, but I could not have done it without, obviously, Alex Pearson Jones, who's literally and figuratively my right-hand man, who has really provided a tremendous amount of guidance and mentorship in his own way to me. So as much as he says that he may have learned from me, I've likewise learned from him. And of course, we had a great coaching staff, and my wife, Susie, Scott Simon, and of course, Will Brown. So we had a phenomenal team. This was not a singular effort on my behalf by any stretch, because we split the coaching duties. And yeah, so it was a banner day for, or a banner week, I should say, for Team GB. And in this case, of course, Ade Misaka.
Yeah, and looks like Zachariah coming in fifth loaded up a 10-kilo jump on his last deadlift. Now that was a
Yeah.
three-way battle broken on body weight for that bronze
The,
medal.
right, right. I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't mention that as well. That's right. Yep. Two Germans and a Swede kind of fighting for that bronze medal position. Yeah, and he loaded up 355 and wasn't able to connect,
The
which
thing, it would have gave him a 770 though.
yeah, I know.
Um, but
Right.
it's kind of and he was pulling after those other gentlemen for the battle of the bronze. So I'm not
That's right.
that 770 wouldn't have been enough for silver, and it's well more than he needed for to break the tie on bronze. So he's gonna go back. I don't know if he just was like had this in his own head. Maybe this is a
Yeah.
national record back home, whatever it might be. However, he's gonna go back and it could be, sir, you could have been on the podium pulling for a lot less, or if you're gonna pull that heavy, might as well sprinkle on a stitch more if you're going all in for whatever your plan was. I don't know where that was gonna land you, unless, of course, like I said, the total might have been a national record back home or that dead or whatever. There might be some a significance we're not sure about. Amelia's getting her apartment broken into as we speak. Um, that's it'd be bonkers on our ratings. I'm gonna clip it. I'm gonna use Amelia's fighting in the background. It throws a guy out her window. I'm like, oh my god! All right, wow, got quite the show here.
Just doing it for
Oh,
doing it for
but okay, so moving on to the 93s and Team Britain. Once again, we got back to back up at the top, number one, number two, Britain. Amelia, you calling this one? What was your impression of the 93s at Euros?
again, it was a really, really good battle. It ended as expected to be Christian doing what he can to keep that crown firmly on his head, and Will and Rico battling it out for that silver position. Again, another weight class that landed on same total, only split by body weight. Um, and Rico didn't come out for his second deadlift. He experienced a lot of cramping, I believe, and then came out for his final pull. But Will Pickering from Great Britain came out last, getting that 360 pull, huge final pull to get deadlift gold to end up on 850 as well, pulling ahead of Rico of France, who's relatively fresh out of the juniors. Will's got a few more years on him in terms of competing. So it was a really interesting battle to see. I think Will probably was slightly the underdog in this battle going into it on people's expectations, but we knew it was Christian to lose. He ended up 12 and a half kilos ahead of Will and Rico, which doesn't feel like a million miles away, but it was, I believe, a number that he did to stay far enough ahead that they couldn't push for it without him unnecessarily overexerting himself and risk losing out on any kilos. But it was a really great battle. And actually the first, and we'll get to it, I imagine later, of a couple of French lifters who opted in those faster primetime sessions for various reasons to not come out at second deadlift.
Yeah, I want to get Matt's impression of this. Obviously, Matt, game day handler of legendary status, about the some lifters not taking their second attempt and instead pushing all their chips in the middle on that third attempt to try to, I don't know. It depends. Now, we've seen this happen before. And if you know, dead to rights, I'm pulling last and I'm going all in. And if the goal is, let's say, like an Enahoro, if the goal is I'm pulling for gold, I don't care. I don't want silver. I don't. Well, let's just see. If you miss your third, you might fall all the way back because you're only moving forward on your opener. A guy like Enahoro will tell you, I don't care. I don't care. We're going all in on the third. Load up the third. Save all the energy you need for that gold medal pull or what have you. Was the case here, Matt, when you were there, that Rico was doing that to try to go all in on his third? And yeah, what was your impression here? Because obviously he hit 335, puts himself in position with an 850, but afterwards, William gets the pull and matched on body weight, or sorry, match total broke the tie on body weight.
Yeah, I think in this particular instance, Ryan, if I'm not mistaken, like Amelia said, I think it was a physical issue. So this was
Is
this
it
was one
okay?
where, yeah, so he was cramping, to the tune of not being able to physically come out. Look, he probably could have come out and taken the attempt, but with that significant amount of cramping, not put his best effort out there. So I'm sure that they thought, hey, look, we're willing to kind of pass this attempt. Let's see if we can get his body and his muscles and his nervous system to kind of calm down so that we can then kind of pick our spot on the third one. So I think this was a physical issue more so than it was necessarily a strategic one, which it's certain we're going to get to in the 105s, where that certainly seemed to be some gamesmanship and some, risk versus reward, which is, we'll get to in just a second. But I think this was a physical one. I think that's why they made the decision, is that he was cramping so badly that he couldn't come out for the second one.
Crazy then that he was in that situation, and if sitting out on that second attempt, it forced him, even under dire situations where his body's betraying him, to make a 35-kilo jump on deadlifts. I mean, it's talk about, you're like, all right, calm the nervous system down a little bit, let the body calm down a little bit. Oh, by the way, you're jumping 35 kilos now because you missed your second attempt. Like, they didn't drop that second attempt weight. It was 320 for a second attempt. And they're like, okay, we're going all in here. And it worked out. He ended up on the podium, but and forcing the hand of William anyways.
Yeah, exactly. I think they were just kind of looking at the score and realizing, look, if we wind up missing our last one here, I mean, we're going to be off the podium anyway. So it was kind of just surveying the scene, seeing what they needed in terms of kilos. And then just to add, what to kind of pile on what Amelia said. I mean, this was the Christian Eindhoven and William Pickering show. And I think, from our perspective, I was able to coach Christian, and of course, Peach, was able to coach William, and just talk about maestro performances from both of these guys. 18 out of 18, just absolutely flawless execution on their behalf. Unfortunately, Christian during the week got a bout of pink eye. So when he arrived to Spain, literally within 24 hours, he got sick. And so, had to physically get his body in line, not just his body weight. So hats off to him, man. Hats off to Christian. This was clearly the first time that I had ever worked with him. And you want to just talk about a consummate professional who was just able to kind of, we use the expression, just stay in the pocket there. And he, because he was the strongest guy in the room, knew that, kind of like Ade, but not to the extent of Ade, knew that he could take his foot off the gas a little bit and not hit PBs. But again, we always say, even if you come into competition and you are less than your best, you can still lift really well. You can still execute well. You can still represent yourself well. And that's exactly what Christian did. And so we were really mindful of that. We were mindful of having a little bit of lead, having a little bit of wiggle room, and being able to do what was required and what was necessary for that gold pedal position. And then William Pickering, I mean, my gosh, this kid was unbelievable. I mean, he had a 2.5 kilo PB in both the squat and the bench, and then added 5 kilos to his deadlift. And so William Pickering, who's coached by RTS's Ross Lepela, who is the M1 world champion in the 83 kilo class. So that's Mike T's, coaching group, if you will. They just put together a phenomenal game plan, and Peach was able to help, orchestrate that on game day. And Will was able to pull a huge 360 on the last deadlift there, to win and get that silver medal position on bodyweight. So I couldn't be more proud of these two guys. Super excited, probably more so for Will, just because he had literally his signature day, right? I mean, he had the best possible day that he could have and just knocked it out of the park and laid it on silver. And then, of course, for Christian, kind of like Ade, this is a high level competition, but one where you're kind of in the driver's seat. But again, using it to kind of see where you are, build momentum, get out of there with the W, and not have to empty the tank. And so we're thrilled that he did.
Moving into the 105s, and you had laid the groundwork here for a bit of shadowing. So,
right,
Coco Clement, living up to his potential doing 920. And for the longest time, Coco's PR was 895. And I mean, we're 25 kilos beyond that. And for the longest time, we all knew he had more than 895. Just stars weren't aligning for him. He's a young guy still in his prime. And then boom, finally it drops and he has the big performance. But looking at this, so handling wise, they decide to not take the second attempt. And they're going all in on that third. But on the flip side, they end up having to load something, giving him a 920 when the silver medalist, Emil Norling, former world champ and European champ, only total with 912 and a half. So but because the last deadlift before him was 372.5. Coco's got to load up 375. This, Matt, break this down for me. How did this work out in terms of game planning? Is this the way you would have done it? Is this obviously all's well that ends well? And Coco, they were confident.
Yeah, I
But
mean, look, the head coach of the French team, Cyril, and those guys, I mean, they're laughing all the way to the medal stand, right? I mean,
right.
this is high risk, high reward behavior, but it's to his credit, Cyril, and of course, Coco. It's knowing the lifter, it's believing in yourself, and it's knowing that you've got that in the tank. And I think, what we see here, Ryan, like you said, his previous PB total was 895. And so had he missed the final pull, where would he have landed? He would have tied his PB total. Right.
I,
And so
I knew you'd do that, Matt.
right. I mean, that's how big that last pull was for him. You know what I mean? Because it led to a 920 gold medal winning performance. I always use the analogy that on game day, you have 9 bullets in your gun, right? And you have 9 shots on target, 9 point scoring, and we use kilos as our points, 9 opportunities to score kilos. So is this something that I would subscribe to and something that I would do? No, absolutely not. I believe in using every single opportunity. However, there are unique situations where perhaps you know your lifter and you trust your lifter, and maybe the flight is really fast. It's moving at breakneck speed. We know these A group primetime sessions move at a really good clip. And, maybe you feel like, yeah, I'm going to sit this one out and I'm going to serve, I'm going to pick my spot like a sniper at the very end. And I've got confidence in my lifter, and clearly Cyril did, and clearly Coco executed to the tune of 375 kilos. So who am I? I mean, I'm not the guy to say that this is wrong. I mean, it paid off. But again, high risk, high reward. It's not something that I would routinely recommend doing. In the case of the 93s, like we were just talking about, it was because of a physical issue. I think this was clearly a strategic gamesmanship, situation that paid off. And so credit to them, to be able to snag the gold medal. And then, of course, to your point, Ryan, we have, legendary lifter Emil Norling coming in second place there, not able to connect on his final deadlift. Amelia, I'm trying to remember that. He actually stood up with that, didn't he? I think he locked it out, but it got turned down, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he locked it out. I think he got it might have been a blue and a yellow. It was 2-1 and no lift for Emil there, which I think was a bit of a shock to everyone. And
Yeah.
he's a very methodical, reliable lifter. It's not something we ever really see him fail on, and I think that was a big shock to everybody. And I know that the preview, all of us were talking about Reagan Sogakis, the kind of junior 105 versus Emil Norling, the old kind of world champion. And I think and I said this to Coco when we were there, I put my hands up and I said, we didn't mention you maybe as much as we should have. And I know that
Right.
Mo, who can't be here in the recap, said, I can't make it to the recap, but do apologize to Coco on my behalf. Didn't recognize his game. And here he is. It was, I think, one of my favorite flights of the entire championships was the battle in the 105s. And I've got to say, like, it's been a long time coming for Coco, and it was very well deserved. And Reagan ended up totaling 900 after missing, I think, that last pull, losing out a few kilos. But it was still, I know he was disappointed, but 3 kilos under his own junior world record total that he got at Malta last year. So the 105s in general has a very, very bright future, not to include, of course, the rest of the world that are yet to compete at Worlds with them. Anatoly, who wasn't there.
Right.
There's a lot of exciting names in the 105s, and if this was the battle with just a percentage of them, then Germany's going to be immense.
And I just reviewing the Emil Norling final pull,
Yeah.
super close, but it was
Yeah.
coming out of his hand. And he had mentioned it actually in his caption when he was recapping this event, saying, I'm not 100% back, but we're getting there. Now he's totaled 928 and a half. And we were saying this on the preview show. Is he going to return to that form? Is he going to exceed that form? I mean, just hitting your previous best is one thing, but he should be exceeding these numbers by now. I mean, he's still in his prime as well. There's no reason why he shouldn't. Narrowly missing that final pull, and it was close. It was that lockout, but it started coming out of his hand, and I don't think I would pass it either.
Right.
And you know, almost poetic here. Emil used to always do that. It's particularly in the juniors when he won the junior title. He'd pass on his second, go all in on his third, telling himself, I'm going to live and die by that deadlift. He was the miracle man in terms of that final deadlift. He beat Anatoly at the European Championships when Anatoly was the reigning world champion and reigning best lifter at the world championships. And Emil upset Anatoly at the Euros with his final pull. Emil is that Mr. Deadlift. That's why when you're Coco and Team France and you're going to play that game of all people to Emil and you're going to go in on your final pull, it's daring because the mill is going to force you to do a massive, massive deadlift. It's one thing when Naohiro does it because he's got a huge gap, at least historically speaking. Let's see with the new 83s what happens at this world. He's got a huge gap between his deadlift and everyone else's. So you're not forcing his hand to the top end deadlift where he's going to be overreached in terms of your dead to his. Whereas Coco and Emil, they're going toe to toe. They're a few kilos away from each other on their final deadlifts. So when Emil sees, okay, you're going to go all in on your final pull, I'm going to make you pull right up to the very edge of where your capabilities are. It's daring. It's daring stuff. And it made it, to your point, Matt, high risk, high reward. And obviously Coco and Team France would say, well, I had the energy to hit my 375 because I didn't pull second, because I didn't pull that second attempt. And Emil, who missed by a hair on his third pull, maybe a Bill that his team's like, damn it, maybe we should have done the same thing. Maybe we're gonna look at each other in the warm-up room and be like, we're only doing two pulls, huh? We're us at the top, we're only gonna use two bullets in that gun. But either way, yeah, good stuff. I was happy to see Coco living up to the hype and putting up 920. He could probably do more than that even. But it's nice for him to finally break into the 900s. God, it feels like forever we were waiting for that and show some potential. And no less, to Amelia's point, a bit of a preview for the World Championships. It's going to be tight. If Emil levels up again and starts hitting that final pole, we'll have a bunch of lifters going 920 and up. And how far up, God knows. We'll have to see how PA Nats goes. Put a pin in that conversation. All right, let's move on to the 120s. And my goodness, talk about a breakthrough performance by Nonzo. Massive deadlift, massive total, only 20 years old. Matt, talk to me about Nonzo.
I don't know, Ryan. I mean, if there are enough superlatives to describe this 20-year-old gentleman, and I do use the term gentleman because he is mature beyond his years. Sometimes I have to pinch myself in my interactions with him because it's like, I'm dealing with this, and I use an air quotes kid. But at other times it's like, man, this 20-year-old is just, again, mature beyond his years and just exceptional and extraordinary in every way. So an extraordinary lifter, an extraordinary talent, but also an extraordinary human being. I mean, you want to talk about somebody who is coachable and who is just willing to buy into the task at hand. He and his coach, James Adcock, were just phenomenal every step of the way leading into this competition. And then, of course, on game day, he just remained in the moment and just went 9 for 9. He hit PBs in every single discipline. We didn't have to empty the tank on squat, but he still hit a big squat PB to the tune of 352.5 kilos. There was a European record there that was kind of hanging, that was kind of teasing us. The record is 355. We did have that on our game plan to potentially load up for 355.5, and it would have been nice to have a chip in the early going. But we also thought, hey, we've got the strongest lifter in the room. Let's be mindful of that. Let's not necessarily empty the tank on squats. We don't need to get greedy. Let's just stay in the pocket. And he hit 352.5. It looked good. It was tough, but he made it. He might have had 2.5 more. I think he probably would have. Likewise, in the bench press, he hit 3 solid benches, ending on 212.5. which was a PB. And I think the story of Nonzo's day clearly was the deadlift, right? And that was the story, in many ways of the men's side of competition, likewise with Ade getting best lifter. But kind of the story of the men's championship was Nonzo hitting this monumental milestone number, of 400 kilos. And I think to Amelia's credit, when she called it on the live stream, she's like, oh my God, that's the fastest I've ever seen 400 kilos move, and it's just, we had the meet one, on the second attempt with his 380. And those were exactly the jumps and the progressions that we had planned on his, game plan and strategy card was 350 to 380, and then just kind of survey the scene and see where we are. And of course, we'd had the meet won by then. And so it was, let's put something on the bar that we know that he can make. I had put in a 411.5 placeholder, which kind of, livened, I think, jazzed the crowd up when they all look up at the scoreboard and they're like, oh my God, he's going to go for the biggest deadlift that's ever been done in IPF history on the classic side, or actually I believe the biggest deadlift that would have ever been done in IPF history. But we were never going to take that number. We weren't going to do that. We had discussed it going in with Nonzo and his coach, and when he had loaded that up, I believe it was at Junior Worlds last year. That was kind of a one-off, and his coach James really didn't sign off on that deal, and neither would I, to just kind of YOLO like that. And that was an opportunity in this championships to load up this milestone number, to get the world record in the deadlift, to get the junior world record in the total. And he's only 13.5 kilos shy of the open world record total, held by, of course, Dennis Cornelius at 978.5. So this could be a harbinger of things to come at the World Championships coming in Germany. But he just had an exquisite performance. He crushed the 400 kilo deadlift. I mean, that was not hard. And I asked him in the back after we celebrated and calmed down, I said, honestly, Nonzo, what do you think you had? And he looked at me and I kind of, I kind of spoke before him a little bit, not trying to influence his decision, but all of us, every single coach, myself, Susie, Peach, Scott Simon, Will Brown, as well as Nonzo, thought, you know what? He probably had the 411.5. I really think that he had 10, 11 more kilos than the 400. That's how comfortable it looked. But it's nice that he's now able to check this box and almost, I don't even want to use the term get this monkey off your back, but it's kind of like now we get to check this box and get this milestone number that's been hanging above him, that's been adding this stress, if you will, because the world anticipates that you're strong enough to do it and you just haven't done it on the platform. Now that box is checked. And now the beauty of it is at Worlds, and I know this isn't a Worlds preview show, he's literally going to be able to take any number he wants on the third attempt, any increment he wants, because 400 is clearly not his limit. That's not his boundary. He is beyond that. And so that was kind of the story of Nonzo Chinye. I just could not be any more happier for this guy. He is just, even at the tender age of 20, he is just a pro. And it's just unbelievable how much potential this kid has. And I think how far he can go in the sport. And then in terms of the rest of the competition, I'll just comment a little bit and then of course let Amelia pop in. We had Nicholas Perrault come in second, was able to hang on there at the end and pull, for that silver medal position on bodyweight. And I was a little bit surprised, I had spoken very highly of Nico on the previous show, and I still think the world of him. I mean, this, to be fair, was an off day for him. 7 for 9 is not what he normally does. We're talking about a guy who routinely goes 9 for 9. And for him to miss his third squat and his third bench, to me, was a little bit surprising. He was able to load up there the 380 kilo deadlift on his final attempt, which was a 10 kilo PB, by the way, in the deadlift for him to secure that silver medal. But, had he gotten those extra kilos, then he's not necessarily in Nonzo territory, but he's able to distance himself from the onslaught that was Victor Vasquez Carrillo, which, again, Amelia touched on it early on. The support that Spain put forth for their lifters was a beautiful thing to hear and listen to in the crowd. Every single time one of these lifters came out, they went ballistic, and I wish we saw that on the American side, that type of nationalism and team spirit. But this guy executed really well. He went 8 for 9. He only missed his third bench because they only went up 2.5. So you're only losing 2.5 there. But this guy was like, I mean, his lifts, if I remember correctly, Amelia, his last lifts were like grinds. I mean, they were RPE like at the limit. So, you know what I mean? So it wasn't like he was sandbagging. I mean, he was emptying his tank. And then, of course, there's just a huge gap between those three podium finishers and then fourth place. But that's kind of the day. And I'm sorry, Amelia, if I stole any of your thunder, but please, from your perspective, let's pour on the praise for Nonso, shall we?
There's no thunder to be stole. I don't have too much to add to that. I'm cognizant, obviously, we need to get through the women as well and give them their time in the sun. But Matt kind of hit the nail on the head, and Ryan, I think you were there. I think it was Nonso's first international in Turkey, and he's a 105, if you could believe him ever being at that body weight. And I think he actually posted a reel recently, maybe even yesterday, about how it was 400 today, but then it was at 17 it was 350 or whatever it was, and then 15 it was like 150 or whatever it was, and the progression of what that deadlift looked like and how what much work has gone into it. Obviously he's once in a lifetime kind of lifter and a phenomenon, but it doesn't mean that there's not been an immense amount of work that's gone in to get to the place that he's gotten to. And I know that he wants to be seen not just as the young phenom, but just a phenom, and an athlete within his own right that it deserves to be there, regardless of the fact that he's significantly younger than the rest of the competition. Nonso is an outstanding athlete, and I know how much that final pull meant to him because obviously, like you said, Matt, he tried that 4:11.5 in Malta and he missed it. And batting up, which you were at as well at Nationals against Tony Cliff, previous world champion, it's a very highly contested weight class against Mo, against Indy. He missed that last deadlift as well. I can't remember exactly how much it was. It was just over 400, like 403 maybe, around about that. Missed that again. So I know that, regardless of how easy that 400 kilos was, and it really, really was, it was getting it that meant everything to him. And I said to him afterwards when I congratulated him, I was like, 4:11.5 in Germany, and he gave me a cheeky little smile. I think he's got his eyes set on the next prize. Like you said, he's got that 400 now. I'm very excited to see where he goes. He's got 3 more years as a junior, and a lifetime left in the Opens. So it's super exciting. And to your point, Nico Pirro didn't have the best day, and I think it's worth mentioning. Nonso deadlifted an amazing 400, and I think slightly outshone what also is an incredible deadlift of 380 from Nico, which isn't something to just kind of look over. It was a phenomenal final pull, like you said, to get ahead of Vasquez Carrillo. Again, a weight class really deserving of being called a battle because it really was.
Look at that Naldo for a sec. So 402.5 Amelia, like you said, he missed that at British Nationals. This was in November. And you fast forward to here and 400 flies. And most people in agreement that the world record probably was there. Nonzo and at British Nats in November, 930. Now we're at 965. That's 35 kilos. And this was November. Nonzo's 20. And when you're talking about when we were in Turkey and we saw him when he was 17, yeah, he's a 105. He legitimately was, he looked like a high school kid. Now he's a monster. He's completely filled out 120 and is a monster at 20 years old. And 35 kilos onto his total this quickly in the first quarter of work for 2025. By the time we get to Worlds, Matt, you were saying he probably had 411.5. That itself would take him right on the cusp of the total world record as well. Yep. By the time Worlds rolls around and he loads up the biggest deadlift in IPF history, he'll probably have the world record in his hands for total as well. This is where he's at. And then we have the return of Rondell Hunt. And I asked Rondell on the podcast, is there anybody you got your eyes on? He's like, I got my eyes on everybody, but guys like Nonzo, Guys like Anonzo are what makes Rondell put his foot on the gas and lose a little bit of sleep and tighten up because he knows how quickly a guy like Anonzo can cover that gap. Is there a gap? Sure. But when they meet, where's that gap going to be? In 2026, if you tell me Nonzo's not doing 1,000 kilos, I'm going to be shocked and rattled. I will say, what happened? How is he
Yeah.
not doing 1,000 kilos? Because he's already 35 kilos away from that. And I just told you he put 35 kilos on his total in 4 months. How in a year's time does he not put another 35? It's almost inconceivable to me. He's going to be a
I
thousand up.
I expect to see Nonso relatively soon on a poster in Sheffield, and I hope
Yep.
that he skirts through this podcast. He takes that clip and uses it for motivation because I wouldn't be surprised. And correct me if I'm wrong, if Nonso ends up at the Sheffield stage, and I know that because of how he's come up and come through, and he's a well-loved lifter, how much support he would get there. But that's something
Oh
I
my
would like to
gosh.
see, regardless of being British. I think just as an athlete, it's something I would love to see him achieve. And I know that's something he has his eyes on as well.
Well, he knows the pathway. He knows the pathway. It's not an easy one because let's see who comes forward from USA. But there will be a battle at Worlds. You got to win it, punch your ticket to Sheffield, and then again, Rondell is back. The legend is back. Let's see where he ends up in the rest of 2025 and 2026 as well. There's tons of possibilities. But yeah, I'm excited. And also, Vasquez giving Nico a run for his money, like you said, Matt, and really emptying the tank on all of his lifts, getting the most out of them for the home nation. And he gave Nico and that team a scare on a day when Nico wasn't at 100%. That's what you
Right.
do.
Yep.
A guy shows up who isn't at 100%, give him the scare of his life. Make him earn it. Make him earn it. And if Nico was missing all of his thirds, he hit the third that he needed to secure that silver, and gave the hometown crowd a hell of a go.
And it's worth thinking about if Nico was on form, what would his total look like if he's having a good day?
100%. Nico, we can't look past him. He's also a young guy who's
Yeah.
relatively fresh out the juniors.
He's an absolute stud. And so the attempts he missed, that's just 17 and a half kilos right there. So that puts him at 947 had he made those other two attempts. So he's definitely in the mix and somebody who needs to be watched, and also consistency and execution is his game. And that's why I just, I'm saying this out of reverence and respect for him. I was just surprised because I'm just not used to seeing him miss, that much. So again, not criticizing, just actually just surprised. But to Amelia's point, that 380 pull is big time. That's a big time pull. That's huge. Obviously outshined and overshadowed by Nonzo, but still 380 is an extraordinary deadlift. And so, yeah, good for him to, as you said, Ryan, that if you're going to make a third one, that's the third one. That's the one you want to make.
He was there
It's the
when he
last
needed
one.
it.
That's
Is
right.
there any? Yeah, the 120s are going to be exciting at World Championships. I mean, when you got France, Spain, Britain, like everyone's rising in the 120s. By the
Oh my
time we get to
gosh.
Worlds, yeah, if Nico hits all of his lifts, like we can have a lot of guys going 950 and up in the
Yep.
120s. It's going to be good. I can't wait for the World. This is to an extent, and it's supposed to be like this by the way it rolls out on the calendar. Euros is a bit of a preview for Worlds.
I love
Euros
it.
in and of itself is a bit of a preview for the World Championships. And some of these people end up converting from European champions to world champions. Moving into the 120 pluses, Timur, what happened here, Matt? You shot it to me first, or Amelia.
Yeah, so Timo was there. He weighed in, and as they're warming up, he hurt his leg during warm-ups and didn't even come out for his first squat. When we initially saw that, we were wondering what happened. His coach came out and he just said legs. So I'm not sure in what capacity that meant he hurt himself, but enough obviously to not compete, which really opened things up for the rest of the competition. We said we don't know what Timo would be able to do at this lighter body weight. He weighed in at 132.6, so I think a good maybe like 15 kilos down from Worlds
Yep.
thereabouts, give or take. But you know, the question still remains, and I hope that he's healthy, moving forwards. But it really did open the door, and it made the the chase for gold and then the chase for bronze, I suppose a lot easier for the other competitors, and it became a three-man race for bronze, and it became a two-man race for gold instead of potentially, because we still don't know how Timo would have performed, the Timo show. But it may not have been that, and it leaves a lot of
Mm.
questions that we had. We were like, oh, we're going to get them answered during Euros, and I feel like nothing's been answered for me.
Well, okay, so I had a couple people come into my DMs after we
Yeah,
dropped that podcast, and they were like, "Well, he always trains like that. That's not new." But no, there's no freaking way. Timor was lifting heavier than that previously. It wasn't always like that. Go ahead, Matt. You look like you wanted to say something. And also, one more thing before I throw it to you. Actually, let me get this out.
yeah.
15 kilos down, cool, but it doesn't look like he's going 120 either. But he obviously 15 kilos is body weight drop. How is that? I don't know if this is so. Is he staying 120 plus? And if he is it just going to be a light 120 plus? And how much does that affect his total? Um, I, I know I think this poses more questions than than answers. Right?
It does. To your point, Ryan, and Amelia's point, it leaves a lot of questions unanswered. And so when I saw him in the warm up room, and I looked up at the screen, this was pre-injury, which I did not see, by the way. But he was over there with his coaches. He was on a platform. I saw him, beginning to get ready, and so on and so forth. When I looked up at the board and saw what he had plugged in for openers on the start list, I was like, "You've got to be kidding me! This is a joke." I was like, "These numbers are coming down. There's no way." I believe he had 380 or 385 kilos for both the squat and the deadlift as openers, and a 240 kilo bench opener. So clearly, in my mind's eye, they were either, number one, delusional and out of their absolute mind. There's no way that he has lost that much body weight and he's going to open on those numbers. Or to what I think they were doing, I think they were, trying to put the rest of the field on panic or on alert and get them to maybe change some things. But those openers were going to have to come down, because even if you just look at his open powerlifting, what he's been able to do more recently, what he did in Malta at the, weighing 155. I mean, he only ended on 390, so he's not opening at a 80 or 85 kilo opener in the squat, weighing 132. And so when I saw him limping out of the warm-up room, we were all kind of shocked. I was like, "Oh my gosh, he's hurt. He's not going to continue." To me, at first blush, it looked like he'd injured his foot, because he could barely put any weight on his foot. I wasn't sure if it was his foot or his ankle, and we were all just speculating. But I asked him at the banquet what happened, and he said it was his hamstring. So he pointed and he showed me his left hamstring. So presumably he pulled it, tore it, something like that during his squat warm-ups, and wasn't able to continue. And so, look, I think all of us, want him to get better and want to see what he's capable of, because he's somebody that, who previously was quote unquote, in the mix and a factor. And so we all want to know, is he going to just be a lighter version of what he used to be, for health reasons, maybe as a 120 plus, or is he going to fully commit and gradually over time make it into that lighter weight class? Well, all of that remains to be seen. So
Still quite a bit of body weight to lose to make 120.
yeah,
I mean, we're 132 is.
yeah,
I mean, you could
yeah.
do water at the end. You could do the last 5 kilos is water. That's still 7.5. We're still kind of heavy, huh?
Look,
Like, okay, put it this way. Let me ask you guys right now. Let me ask you guys right now. Yes or no? He makes 120 for Worlds.
For Worlds? No.
no way, no way, no
That's harder
chance.
than Chelsea Cup.
No, there's no chance,
So,
because also, in addition to him having to cut an additional 12 kilos of body weight just to make 120s, he's now nursing an injury, right? And so top priority, or at least in my thought, would be, hey, get healthy, right?
yeah.
And so if you're reducing calories that much, that doesn't put forth the best anabolic environment for growth and repair of tissue. And so I would think you would want a surplus of calories to get that hamstring in order first, get that sorted, and then worry about shedding body weight. And he ain't, I'm no Eric Helms or Kedrick Kwan, but he ain't cutting 12 kilos of water. So he's going to have to, cut a limb off or something if he wants to make 120 at this point. He will not be a 120 in Lithuania if he comes at all. Or I'm sorry, in Germany. In Germany.
And the weights he was shifting in prep
Yeah.
were not even close
No
to
way.
the weights that, I mean, obviously, yeah, those openers he had to be placeholders, but he was squatting weights that 74 kilo lifters were squatting. Like I'm talking like Perk and whatnot still, but nevertheless, nowhere close to what he previously would be lifting. And deadlifting, like it wasn't even close. This is a guy who's a 400 kilo and up deadlifter. And he
Yeah.
wasn't even close to that in prep for this. That people telling me, no, he always trained like that. There's no way he trained that submaximal like this. Like not even close to his previous numbers.
Right.
It's so many singles that were what is going on? I need to know. I'm so curious. But the thing is, he might not even be 100% for Germany.
Yeah, and it's really tough because there's a language barrier there. I mean, anybody on the Georgian team, I mean, to my knowledge, none of them speak a lick of English or a language where we could communicate. So it was even a little bit awkward me trying to get an answer out of him at the banquet, but he just did point to and grab his hamstring. So that's all I know.
Nevertheless, yeah. So Victor from Ukraine,
Mhm.
993.5, a good steady pace away though at 975. Jan Kochak, who missed his second squat, retook 360, and then missed his second and third deadlifts. And usually, Jank on a good day will go all in and be hunting for that world record, biggest deadlift of all time as well, but not to be on this day. And then Andre from Norway with 955, previously mentioned, there's a battle for bronze, three-way battle, and he edges it and takes the bronze medal. Anything else we should say about the men's before we kick it off to the women's? If you're wondering, so in terms of team points, Britain coming in first, France second, Spain third, the host nation coming in third, which is always nice when the host nation has a good showing. And for best lifters, Ade took it, Shell coming in second, and Coco having the performance of his career, living up to his potential, taking the third place on best lifter for the tournament. Anything else we should pitch in there? Should we move on to the women's?
Let's move to the women's. I promise, Amelia, I'm going to be very quick. I just want to give a shout out to Paul Kirkbride Richards. This was his first internationals representing Team GB. Executed really, really well. Hit a squat PB at 385. Hit a bench PB at 230. Wasn't able to secure his final deadlift, which was, I mean, but he had an 8 for 9 day, and we had the bronze medal pull in our hands. So a little bit disappointing there, but he was a crowd favorite, a fan favorite. Really just engaged with the crowd. I mean, for somebody to come to their first internationals to soak up the moment, I think he emptied the tank in terms of soaking up the moment and really represented himself well. He will be on our team going into Germany, along with with AJ Sharma, but he will be there and be on the team. And so now that he's got that first taste of international competition, we anticipate him to hopefully build on this total and be a threat to potentially get on the podium, possibly in Germany. And just the final thing was just Sank, just a little disappointing there. I mean, just an erratic lifter. And I think it's one of these things where it's like he just misses too many lifts. And I don't know why, Amelia, maybe you have some background on this. He literally has the squat stands almost set up like like he's doing a quarter squat just to get the rack out of the weight. When he stands up, if you watch where the bar is, it is almost above or at the tip top of the upright. And so I saw him doing this in the warm-up room, and none of us could understand it. I mean, maybe he trains in a gym where he only has access to a cage and he prefers the pins set low, but he is literally doing a quarter squat to get the weight out of the rack, which makes the setup incredibly arduous. And that's why he missed a second attempt, because he was unsteady. He came back and smoked it on his third, but I just don't understand, which just
Yeah,
lends itself to this erraticism that is his performances.
I I feel like that was scratched out of my memory until you said that. It
Yeah.
was really quite bizarre. The only thing I can think that could be the reason is maybe he just, as a bigger guy, you know, needs the lower rack height to get that kind of shoulder mobility to get the bar on his back where he needs it. But I do remember even commenting it on the live stream saying how like how low that was, and I even wondered if it was a mistake. But yeah, he came out for that every single time. I think he's a great lifter when he has a good day, but obviously
Right.
in the 20 pluses, you miss a couple lifts, and that could be 50 odd kilos, you know.
He's also
Yeah.
dealt with a lot of injuries in the past. Like when he showed up at previous worlds, loading up for that deadlift world record at the end. And some people are like, oh, is he showing up purely for the deadlift world record? And he's just, looking past the three lift, so to speak. He was like, no, I mean, I show up with that targeted for sure, but I'm injured like crazy. So that's literally all I could do in prep. There are times when he said, almost my entire prep is just deadlifts. I couldn't even squat. I couldn't even like he's dealt with he's been plagued with a lot of injuries. So in terms of the squat setup, I don't know. I got no idea. Maybe it is how he's got to get the bar settled or what. I have no idea. But I know yeah, injuries also has plagued him in terms of the erratic performances that you allude to, Matt. But you know what? I've made a decision. I'm going to chop this up into two different episodes. Makes it easier for people. So if you're listening to this, you're going to have to drop into the next episode, which will be the women's. So I'll call out here for all those listening. Please do subscribe, give us high ratings, and until next time, six pack Lapadat, six up, and we are out.